Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. I am super excited to share this new quilt that I just created. It's a wall hanging, and I want to share with you the process. Hopefully you will be able to get an idea of it. I'll show you better pictures here in just a minute. But what I did was I created some patterns for my Spoonflower shop, and I selected 8 of them, and these are the patterns that are in this quilt. And I'm really excited to share that this quilt was intended to be something entirely different. So I'm going to take you through that process, and I was so terrified to actually cut up the quilt top that was almost finished to create this one. But you know, it just is a reminder to trust the art process, and that's what I did. So I'm hoping that this video inspires you to take risks if you are feeling the pull to try something a little bit different, or to undo something you've already created to create something entirely new. The other thing that I'd like to share is fantastic news. I acquired recently a 1950s Suprema sewing machine. Her name is Penelope, and I'm just delighted. And so she actually helped me create these quilts. So I sewed this quilt on Penelope, and I'm just very pleased that she was able to handle the bulk of it also, because here in Portugal, I had a hard time finding cotton batting, so I actually used acrylic batting, which is much more pillowy. And but the sewing machine was a trooper, and I will show you her as well. So I hope that you enjoy this video. It's definitely more vlog style. It's not a how-to, but I'm just going to share my process, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you do like this video, I sure would appreciate a thumbs up, a like. Not a thumbs up, a like. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you want to see more of this kind of content, then please subscribe. I also have other things to show you, a couple illustrations that I created. We'll get to all of that. All right, you guys, thank you so much. Here we go. So I'm starting with my illustrations first, and that's because as I was anticipating the arrival of my Spoonflower fabrics, which by the way took 3 weeks to get to my home here in Portugal, I only had quilts on the brain. And as many of you already know, I am a room portrait artist. I love creating furniture in an illustrative style and in rooms, and painting them as well. But I was really inspired by a class that Liz Kohler-Brown teaches on her website. I highly recommend it. And she just takes you through the steps to creating an armoire, and then a room, and the pieces of furniture that you might think about putting in that room. And because I had quilts on the brain, I thought I'd create a quilt cabinet, one that reflected maybe a day where you might invite a friend over and have tea and have some cakes and just look at quilts and possibly sew. So the next illustration you're going to see is a setup, in my imagination, where I've invited somebody I adore over to quilt with me, and she's brought over her sewing machine, and we're just going to have a day of pure fun. I'm really happy with the way this illustration turned out. I created it in Procreate for the iPad. So I was on the hunt for a vintage sewing machine, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. So I used some images from Pinterest for the inspiration for this illustration. Again, in my imagination, I'm inviting somebody I love, a good friend who loves to sew as well, and we are in my quilt art studio of my dreams, creating quilts together. So Liz Kohler-Brown in her class does a really good job of helping to inspire you to think beyond one piece of furniture, how to tell a story. And so I imagined, that we would take a break and go have our tea and cakes after some sewing. And I used one of the little quilts in the cabinet as inspiration to place a folded quilt on the sewing table, and then some bits and bobs. And then you'll see here how I go through several color possibilities. At first I thought I wanted a little more vintage vibe, but then, I have this just love of bold, bright colors. I adore pink and red in general, that combination. And so I decided to go in that direction. So you're going to see the colors change here. I really wanted this artwork to go with the other artwork, with the quilt cabinet. What I really loved about this class is now I'm thinking in terms of stories, and it's a great way, I think, to approach art. We think of artwork sometimes of working in a series, but a story I felt like gave me more opportunities to find those little details, and it really inspired me to be more creative with it and have more fun. So here is Penelope, my new Suprema sewing machine. She was made in Japan in the 1950s, and you can see that she has some really cool chrome details inspired by the cars of that time. She weighs a ton. She does only a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch, which is exactly what I was looking for. She sews really well, and I just am having so much fun with her. I love how she sounds. Even my husband thinks she's pretty quiet. So anyway, I just feel like we're a match made in heaven. So as I thought about the quilt that I wanted to make, and I wanted to use fabrics that I'd created, I wanted to approach it with a different idea in mind, and that was to use larger print patterns. I feel like I don't see very many quilts with large print patterns, so I designed all of these patterns in a smaller print format, but I just went into Spoonflower and changed their size. So now they're all enlarged. These are fat quarters, and I love that the motifs, look great, bigger. A lot of these are originally painted by hand using acrylic gouache paints, and then I go ahead and turn them into digital patterns. This one, the brown one, was just a doodle that I did in Procreate, but the purple one you see here with the red, this is actually painted paper that I then turn into the patterns. And it's fun to see, designed by Alma Cox at the bottom. This is a cotton poplin. So the one that I'm unfolding for you right now is a little bit older pattern. It's their Petal Signature Cotton, and it's a little bit heavier weight. And I actually prefer the cotton poplin that arrived, and it holds up super well in the washing machine. So here I am cutting up the pieces and putting them on the design wall. I'm hugely inspired by the quilts of Gee's Bend. I also incorporated some black in between some of the fabric pieces just to make the colors pop a little bit more. And you can see that it's very wonky. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants, putting this thing together, but it's not really turning out the way I imagined. But I keep going, I'm putting in the borders, I keep thinking to myself, I need more black, I need more black. That's sort of the conversation that's going in my head. And then I go off the rails here at the bottom, and for whatever reason, I was inspired to cut that angle really sharp there at the bottom. And this is where I just decided, you know what? It's not working for me at all. I do love the patterns, but I feel like it's just not doing much. So I removed the bottom, and then I just cut the whole thing up. And surprisingly, there wasn't a lot of waste. So I was feeling kind of guilty about it, like, oh God, I hope I don't, waste a ton. But as I started to piece it together, I saw this table and this wonky chair, appearing, I guess you could say. And that's when that whole story, that I was just talking about with my illustrations started to happen. It's like, okay, I can see it, right? There's this little story unfolding where I've got the table and the chair, and then I was really inspired to put some traditional elements. So even though the sawtooth star is wonky, I thought I'm going to add that. And then I found this cute pinwheel flower on YouTube, and I will link to the videos that I watched to create both the flower and the sawtooth star. And then I thought, okay, I need more flowers because they were super fun to make. And I felt like it was a nice contrast to have these traditional blocks with the wonkiness of the table and the chair. So you can see that, more was happening here. I saw a bird in the story. And so what this meant was I had to deconstruct the black. And by the way, the black fabric is not mine, and neither are the dots. So I went to the fabric store to find more black, and they did not have any more black. They'd run out. And so they did have this cute polka dot fabric. And so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to add the black and white and, just see where it all goes. So again, the bird, I will link to that. And then I thought it might be fun to put like little knobs at the top of the chair, and these eventually I will applique on. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to probably end up quilting in the ditch to kind of put it all together, but also I saw some applique components as well. So here I'm thinking this quilt is pretty much done. I, added the borders. I feel like, it's in pretty good shape. And then that day I received news from my daughter that her yellow lab, my grand dog, was possibly not doing so great. He had some tests done, and of course my husband and I were hugely worried. So I just decided I needed to do something to bring some Maddox energy into this quilt and just pour my love into it. So I decided to sacrifice this chunk under the table, and I just cut it all away, and I thought I'm going to design a block image of Maddox. So I had a lot of brown fabric left, and so I had to use that because I couldn't add yellow. It would not have worked with the quilt, but I think Maddox would forgive me. And great news, he's doing great. He's healthy and all is well, but it did give me the opportunity to pour my love into this quilt, just thinking about my sweet grand dog Maddox. So I appliqued his eyes, and I gave him a bigger appliqued nose. Most of this quilt is quilted in the ditch, and I do have some appliqued motifs like the leaves, and I used embroidery floss, 2 strands, to get a nice thick outline. And I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I'm actually going to continue doing a little bit more details. Like, for example, this leg needed a little extra, so I put some stars in there. And I'm going to probably add just some very simple stitching all around it in that off-white embroidery floss. I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out. I'm really glad that the larger print also translated well to the smaller, cut pieces, like in the flowers and in the sawtooth star and in the bird. So I don't feel like anything was lost in making the motifs bigger in the pattern. So I'm really happy with that. I'm actually going to create a small collection for you in Spoonflower with these exact patterns. So if you're interested in that, you can check out my Spoonflower, and that is linked below. So I had a lot of fun creating this. Again, it wasn't easy, but I'm glad I did it, and I hope it has inspired you to maybe look at your quilts a little bit differently, or your artwork, or redoing something if you want to, if you feel pulled in that direction. Thank you again for your attention and time. Happy creating, everyone, and see you soon.